Welcome to the Focused Professional Podcast, sponsored by the Society of Photographers. I'm your host, Joe Lenton, and this is episode 12. Welcome to the Focused Professional Podcast. And today we've got an artist that I've admired for a long time, whose work I've enjoyed seeing, always enjoy seeing when that comes up on social media. Somebody whose tutorials I've enjoyed, but never really quite managed to get the hang of doing that. So I'll leave that to her. But this is Renée Robyn. Hello, Renee.
Hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for taking the time out to be on the show. It's always a pleasure seeing your work when that comes out. And how much of what we see on social there is like your kind of commission work? How much of it is your own projects? Because I know that quite often when you're working commercially, certainly with my work, you can end up with these horrible things called NDAs where you're not actually allowed to show people things.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's definitely a thing. It depends year to year. How often? I would say this last year, I would say it's about 50-50. It's like paid versus personal. Some years it's like 60-30. Some years it's 90-10.
Wow.
It really varies wildly year to year. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that is quite some variation. For me, I normally tend to find it's the interesting ones that you're not allowed to put out there. Or you've got an embargo on it for like 6 months, by which time you've forgotten you've done it.
100%. Yeah. No, that was very, very common for me back in like 2015, 2016. It's like so much work I would do. I was just like, I'm doing tons of cool and I can't like tell anybody about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then you 6 months later, you're thinking, oh, yeah, there was something I was going to stick on social media. Now, where was it? What was it?
Yeah. Which hard drive is it on? Which city was that? I don't actually remember.
Well, because you travel for work quite a lot as well, don't you?
Yeah, I did quite a bit, for a long time.
Yeah, so, you probably then sort of, once it's coming off an embargo, you're in a different country. So you don't necessarily even got your hard drive with you.
100%, yeah. So I did start storing huge amounts of projects and like the finished work anyways on like different online places, just so that I could be like, okay, when the embargo lifts, I can at least access it. Yeah. Started doing that just for my own sanity.
So speaking of different countries, I've read somewhere that you actually like learning languages.
I do actually. Yeah, I'm terrible at a bunch of them.
I kind of suspect that you've probably learned lots of phrases to do with cats. Is that right?
That is true. Yeah, there was once upon a time when I was traveling a lot, I could say cat and order chicken in 9 languages.
Excellent. I'm sure that's very useful.
Well, yeah, not so much. The ordering chicken part, yes, but the being able to say cat. I mean, because whenever I see a cat somewhere, I'm just like, cat. Like, there's always just like seeing a cat out in the wild that's like a friendly cat. It's like, hey, what's up? It's just like seeing the first cat for the first time every time. You're just like, there's that kitty, and it likes me. Please don't have
there is that. Yeah. Sometimes the friendly ones, you can't be too sure.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that a lot of people tend to shy away from, learning different languages. Certainly the Brits have this kind of reputation for their version of speaking French is actually just to talk English louder.
That's fair.
So it's quite an unusual thing for somebody to take an interest in languages. Is that something you've always had, like through school and so on, or is that something that's developed later?
Well, I mean, being in Canada, we have to do French and English all through school, and so I did that and kind of fought my way through it because I don't like anybody telling me what I have to do. But I have like a decent foundation for French, not so much to communicate back, but at least to kind of understand what's being said to me. And then I started traveling a lot for work, and I was spending a lot of time in the Netherlands and in Germany and stuff like that. And so I was just like, well, I guess I should get at least, to a similar point of being able to sort of understand what's being said to me and then communicating back in English. And then I was just like, well, it'd be better if I could communicate back in those languages. But yeah,
Yeah.
I use it mostly for stress reduction. So like at the end of the night, every single night, I'll spend about half an hour working on one language or another. So right now I'm working on Spanish, French, Dutch, German, and then I'm learning the Arabic and Russian alphabet.
That's tricky. Yeah. Yeah, that is tricky. I did once you start getting into different alphabets, it's a whole new ball game. And
Yeah.
when you start getting into stuff that's not read from like left to right, instead goes from right to left or something, it's like, whoa, messing with my
Yeah.
brain.
Well, Arabic actually reminds me a little bit of learning shorthand. When I was younger, my mom taught me some shorthand. I mean, shorthand basically works in vowel, like, sound shapes, right? So I can transfer it to any language. But yeah, Arabic reminds me a little bit of learning shorthand, even though, I learned how to spell teddy bear. I don't know how to say it yet, but I was like, oh, interesting. What I think is really fun and what makes Arabic so difficult is that the letters on them on their own make one shape, but then you put it into a word and the whole shape changes. And I was just like, I was
Oh.
like, oh man, this is gonna be a
Ooh.
long road.
Does that have like extra little dots and marks and things for vowels? Because I think Hebrew
Yeah,
does, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does a little bit of that. I don't know much about
Yeah.
Hebrew, but yeah, it's Hebrew was also on the list. So I don't know. I've got enough going on right now these days, so I can.
It sounds like it with all those languages. I mean, as long as you can order a beer and something to eat
Yeah,
wherever you are,
and
you're
find out
fine.
where the bathroom is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Basically, something to eat, something to drink, thank you, and where's the bathroom? Those are like the four phrases you should learn in any language wherever you're traveling to.
Well, it sounds like you were brought up very well. Very polite.
Canadian, we say thank you and sorry for everything.
Yeah, Brits apologize an awful lot too. It's like, somebody bumps into you and spills your pint. You say sorry for some reason. You
Oh,
think,
I apologized to a stool the other day. I knocked it over and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry." And I was like, "It's a stool. It doesn't care."
it's not even anybody on it.
Yes, exactly. There's nobody home.
Yeah, I mean, my background at sort of at university initially was with languages, is how I met my wife, and
Thing.
so I've got quite an interest in languages myself. So hearing somebody else learning them and doing it for fun, because most people, when you say you've done more than one language, they just go, "Oh, no way,
Yeah.
not gonna touch that," and you think, and that you do it to de-stress,
Yeah.
not because actually you really feel like putting your brain through the ringer. You somehow find it de-stressing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do. I find it really relaxing. I mean, sometimes it stresses me out. Like learning some of the Russian alphabet confuses
Mm-hmm.
the crap out of me because there's the same letters, but they don't make the same sounds. And my brain, especially
Yes.
because it's at night and I'm going to bed and I'm de-stressing, my brain just short circuits and it's just like, why can't I
Mm.
get this right? So that one can sometimes stress me out a little bit, but it is really fun watching because I watch a lot of foreign documentaries and stuff like that and like foreign
Ah.
films. And so I love being able to listen to them and be like, oh, I knew that word. Like, I don't know what the hell, I don't know what else they said, but I knew that word. And last week I
Cat,
didn't.
chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or even like simple words like that or it or there or them, and it's like, oh, that's really fun because last week when I watched the episode of this previously, I didn't understand any of the words and now I understand some of them. And so it's starting to happen
Mm.
as well with Arabic. Like we have a large Arabic community, especially where I live. I'm really close to the Islamic Academy. And so there's
Okay.
lots of Arabic signs, with
Mhm.
small businesses and stuff. And I'm starting to be like, oh, I know that letter. It's super fun. I know that letter.
It's supposed to be actually quite good for keeping your brain sort of refreshing itself and growing new sort of neural pathways and things like that, apparently, as well.
Yeah, that's actually
So,
one of the big reasons why I started it is a couple of years ago, a woman blew a stop sign and T-boned the car that my mom and I were in, and I got concussion from it. And this is not my first one, unfortunately, so the effects are getting more and more compounding.
mm,
And so I had a lot of complications from it. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I was talking to the concussion clinic and I was like, what can I do? And they were like, brain games are great. And I was like, how about languages? Because I
Hmm.
hadn't been traveling as much the last couple of years, and therefore, like, using the Dutch and German that I knew, I
Mm.
wasn't in the Netherlands or Germany. I haven't been over in like 4 years, which is like hard to imagine because I used to be over there for like 3 or 4 months a year for
Oh,
like
wow.
12
Right.
years. So to not have that anymore, I was just like, I could feel because my social media is also set up because I set it up when I was overseas, like a long
Hmm.
time ago. So it's set up that whoever I'm communicating with, whatever their Facebook is set to, mine switches to that language, which is really fun.
Mm.
I don't know how it
Hmm.
happened, but like when I'm talking to my Dutch friends, my Facebook switches to Dutch. When I'm talking to my German friends, it switches to German. When I'm talking to my
Oh,
Polish
right.
friends, that gets super confusing because I don't know anything about Polish.
I didn't know you could even do that, so that's
I
interesting.
don't know
Yeah.
how it happened, but it is a thing. So like, their notifications will show up in their native language. And so it's like it's interesting for me. So I said, okay, well, what about languages? And I said, languages are great. And I was like, perfect. So I've got two apps on my phone. One of them, I use Duolingo, which I find is like mostly just like the gamification of learning. It's
Hmm.
so formal. I don't think people who speak those languages naturally speak that formally, but it's
Hmm.
still good for like learning the words and, some grammar and stuff like that. But then I basically Googled, I was like, what are the best language apps for learning if you want to become a polyglot? And
Hmm.
Speakly kept coming up on top. And so I got Speakly and I was like, oh yeah, this is like a whole nother level. Like if you're interested in learning other languages,
Mm.
Speakly is very, very good because it's based off of the most commonly spoken 4,000 phrases in any language.
Oh, right.
And so it's really, really interesting that way. And so I like to compare, like how
Mm.
Duo will teach me how to speak something versus how Speakly will.
It
Um,
doesn't always start out with how do I get to the train station, please, and stuff like that we always used to have in our textbooks at school.
no, that is definitely some of it for sure. Is there's a lot of train stations. Yeah.
Oh, the interesting thing that I've found, having come from a sort of a language background, is, and I wonder how true this is for you with the way that you think, is that for me, images are kind of another form of communication. So I think of an image as again kind of saying something with how you put it together. So not that there's necessarily a strict grammar, but you can learn to read images, you can learn what kind of symbols and colors and things play what kind of roles. So
Interesting. I've never actually
yeah.
thought of that before. That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, it's probably a fairly nerdy one. I doubt very many people would bother to go down that route and all. But I think when you're trying to put something together, especially like for an advertising image or something that's got to tell a story quite quickly, you want everything in there to contribute to that in a positive way. So yeah, I suppose for me, it's a little bit like thinking, how can I say something concisely without going on and on and on for ages? How can I get an image in a way to do that sort of thing visually?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I should think about it because I make images for a living, but yeah, that's an interesting thought, especially how it relates to languages. I'm
Mm.
gonna marinate on that. That's fun for me. My brain is like puzzle piece, install.
Yeah. Well, if you want to get super nerdy with that, there's this thing called semiotics, which is a subdiscipline of linguistics and so on, which looks at basically how we have systems of signs to communicate with. It's initially applied to languages, but it's also something that you can use to apply visually, culturally, and so some things are like a kind of a direct representation.
I'm
Some
writing that word
things
down right now. I'm just moving my tea out of the way to some piece of paper. Semiotics.
Yeah, you can guarantee the listeners will be switching off about now, but we're having fun. Yeah, you've got like sort of the main types. There's one which is kind of like if you have like a little picture of a tree, an oak tree, which is standing in for a tree. That's a kind of almost like a one-to-one correlation. And in other instances, you might have something like a footprint, which is called an indexical sign, which points to something beyond itself. So it points to was that a male or a female person, a
Right.
child, an adult who made that footprint, and so on. And then you've got the really sort of abstract symbolic ones. And a lot of language works in a very sort of similar way, but it's an interesting one. Wake up at the back there. No, it's an interesting one for putting together images, I think. So what's
Yeah, so
what's
that's the difference between like someone like me who's getting taught by the internet to speak languages and someone who went to school for languages.
uh,
The,
well,
the
I
the
wouldn't
depth
say
of
I'm
comprehension is very different, and the application of it is. Mine
I
is just
wouldn't
like,
say I'm necessarily very typical because we did do some linguistics and that at university when I did the languages. So we did Chomsky and drawing these funny little diagrams and all that kind of stuff, which is
mhm.
like not useful at all. But
But it's
I,
interesting. Chomsky is very interesting.
I just have this bookshelf full of things that I know that nobody is ever going to nick because
Yeah.
nobody want to read them but me. So I don't have to worry about finding out who I've lent a book to because people look at my shelf and go, "Ah, you're all right."
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that book of CDs in your car gets broken into and they don't take the CDs and you're just like, but
Yeah, yeah. What have you got against my taste in music?
exactly. But no, like the interesting thing you're mentioning about like saying things concisely and without rambling on and on and on. I'm working on my art book right now and
Mm.
I'm getting a crash course in writing because of course I'm not a writer. So and this book is largely there's not a lot of writing in it. There's about 10,000 words so far, so it's not very much.
Mm.
But still, I ramble and then I read it back to myself and my eyes glaze over halfway through and I'm just like, "Oh God, I need an editor."
Yeah, that's kind of, I suppose, the litmus test, really. If you're reading it back and you're bored,
Yeah.
then
Yeah, yeah,
your
exactly.
readers are not going to be enjoying it, probably.
Nobody's
So,
gonna care. Yeah. Yeah, I
so
actually
how's the
started.
image side of that going then?
Oh, it's good. I mean, have been torn on how many images to put in the book. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a 300-page book. And so I culled down the images in it from 3,200 down to about 400 images, which means right now it's a 400-page book, which is 100 pages over than what I planned. And I was like, oh no. And I still had to put words in somewhere and like, oh no. So I'm talking to the book designer that I'm bringing on about this and just like, how do we do this? Because not all these images have to be full page, but some of them should be double page, right? But then
Yeah.
this is where like I find, and this is not meant to be, you know, kicking down on myself or anything like that. But there's something about when you make a book and you put all of your work together and you go, oh wow, no, you like center composition way too much. Because if I'm going to put anything double spread, it's like right through the middle of a person.
Oh no.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Mistakes were made. I chose poorly.
Yeah, that
So,
does make that rather difficult, especially if it's not a lay flat.
yeah, exactly. Well, at 400 pages, there's no way you can make it a lay flat. Like it's
Not
too,
really.
no, it's too big. I talked to the printer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I chose poorly. So I'm having to make design choices now going like I had planned on this book being a vertical book. And so I have the cover art designed for a vertical book. And
Mhm.
now I'm going, crap, maybe I need to make it horizontal. So I'm gonna have to call up my cover artist and be like, I love your work so much. How much to do it a second time? Like horizontal instead. I'm so sorry. So yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
it's a steep learning curve when you do anything like that,
Oh
isn't
my
it?
God. Yeah. Yeah. You're just like, here, there's no water wings. Learn to swim. You're just like, like taking
Yeah.
in water.
Yeah, and the thing is, just because you can like compose a decent image doesn't necessarily mean you can like compose a page in a book. It's a different
Totally different skill
skill.
set. Yeah, 100%. Like I do not know anything about book design, which is why I have hired a book designer.
Hmm.
I talked to some friends who have done books, and one of them he told me this story about how and we're working with the same book designer because I love how she laid out his book. She did just such an incredible job. It's exquisite. His name is Steve Richard. He does like these incredible art nude books, and one of them is called Ariel, and it's just like chef's kiss. It's stunning.
Okay.
So shout out for that book. It is incredible, incredible work. But anyways, so he started like mucking around with the book design and being like, like, oh, but what if we tried this? And oh, what if we tried this? And oh, what if we tried this? And then he sent the samples out to some friends that he trusted. And the friends were fortunately very honest with him. And they were like, what is going on with these pages? And he's like, oh, well, I thought. And they're just like, don't, don't think. Just let her do it. Just get out of the way. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do with this book as well, is just be like, when I send everything over to her, I'm just going to be like, doing a thing. If I notice anything jarringly out of place, like the wrong text is with the wrong image, that's different. But, maybe if she makes those decisions, it might be for a better reason, where like maybe that paragraph actually fits better with a different image than the one that I thought it would, right? She's going to look at it from like a completely different skill set. So I'm really excited and or terrified to see what she's going to say. And then I'm also very terrified of the amount of red ink that I get back from an editor. So a friend of mine went to journalism school, so he's got editorial skills as well. And so I was just like, I'll just send you everything and then, just shred it. And he's like, most people I do this for, they don't talk to me anymore afterwards. And I was like, I know. It's okay. I'm not that sensitive about this. I just I need this to make more sense.
Well, it's absolutely worth it, because you think otherwise you've got your work, which is at a certain level, and then you're presenting it using a skill set which is at a far lower level. You think
100%.
You might as well get a partner in it that's going to be able to complement your contribution with their contribution at the same level and give you a final product that you can be really proud of.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one thing that I've started doing with some of this stuff, with some of the sentences, because I notice every now and then I'll write like those old British paragraphs where it's like an entire paragraph is one sentence, and you're just like, no.
That sounds very German as well, where they just seem to go on and on and on, and it's like, find the verb and then eventually you'll find the full stop as well.
Yeah, exactly, because I read a bunch of like old English books every now and then, and sometimes, man, I can get like half a page and I'm like, okay, I need a break. It's like, that was so long. I have some sentences that can kind of run on like that, and I hate it. And I'm just like, okay. I mean, you hear how much I say like when I'm communicating English. So this is not. I did well in English in school, but I did not go to university for it. So, anyways, I started running through these paragraphs, and like some of the sentences, I've been running it through ChatGPT, being like, hey, can you take this, but make it like more concise and a little more reader friendly, and then I'll read what it says. And then like there's every now and then I'm just like, oh, that's actually a better way to phrase that part of that sentence, and I can cut out, like, I'm not going to copy the whole thing because ChatGPT is just not that good.
No, but there are times when it can do things well.
Yeah, like it takes the edge off. And I think what it does is it takes the edge off the editor of all the bleeding eyes he's going to have reading this atrocious grammatical hot mess that I'm sending him.
It's a funny old thing though with the AI and ChatGPT, a prime sort of example. Sometimes people type in there, "Oh, write this as if you were a college professor," and you think it doesn't know what that is.
No idea. Yeah, it has no idea.
It can't pretend it's an expert in something, and it doesn't know it's not an expert in it either.
Yeah, yeah. And you can't compare it.
It just blurts stuff out, and it doesn't 100%. Give you anything that necessarily makes any sense, but it's super confident. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. But I have found that it has been quite helpful though, in just, if I'm not sure of a sentence, or like the sentence structure doesn't really make sense, but I don't know enough and how to fix it myself, and I'm still trying to make it just like a little bit easier for the guy who's doing the editing to just like, just take this paragraph or take this page. Even sometimes I'll have it just like go through the whole page and just say, make this a little bit more reader friendly, or make this a little bit less flowery. And then there's usually like parts of a sentence in there where I'm just like, okay, yeah, that arrangement of words skips out all of this stuff here that I don't actually need. And then I keep both. So I've decided that I'll just keep both copies of it, and I send both of them now, instead of like, I'm sending both versions to the guy who's doing the editing, being like, and I'm very clearly being like, this is the one that I cleaned up, and this is the raw page. So you can just throw this out if you want. Like, you don't even have to look at it. I'm fine. I don't care. But at least so that they're both there, because sometimes the other thing that can happen that I've noticed when I'm editing down the words is I will edit it down too far. And then it loses the thing that makes it sound like me. Whether I'm using like ChatGPT or just like through my own culling of words, of just being like, oh, that's too flowery, that's too this, that's too that. It's like every now and then it can be a little bit flowery with the words, and that's okay. Yeah. But I don't really know enough, sentence structure to build that in eloquently. I don't think anyways. I'm really good at writing funny Facebook posts, and that's about where it starts and stops.
Well, that has its place, yes. But with the actual images that are going in there, is there a particular structure to it? Is it telling a story over a period of time, or is
No,
it a secret?
no, it's not a secret at all. No, this is basically my favorite work from the last 15 years. So
Right.
yeah, and I can't say my favorite because there's a bunch of favorites in there that didn't make the cut that like I have these like great emotional connections to, but the work isn't quite, it doesn't, when I put it with the rest of it, it kind of stands out and it's like, okay, why are you there? Like, I love you, but I'm sorry, bye. But yeah, so this is a digital art book. And then I'm also working on the next book that's going to come out afterwards is a Shibari book.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's the one where you're dangling people on a rope, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
As
I'm
you can
very
see, I've got
excited for that.
lots of technical understanding of that. Yeah, that sounds a bit like you're hanging them in your studio, but no.
Yeah, I mean we are, but not by their neck most of the time. Most of the time.
Depends how the day goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you good or bad? Kidding. Our shoots are not like that. They're so clinical.
So, how is your new studio? Because you've recently had to move into a new one. Are you enjoying that? Are you settling in okay?
So I still haven't decided on which one I'm going to use monthly.
Okay.
There's two studios that I found. So yeah, when the building got sold at my old place, that was like heartbreaking, but also for 100% the right reasons. The guy who owns it owes us nothing, and he provided an incredible space for many, many, many years longer than he needed to.
Hmm.
So I'm very, very grateful for the time in there, but I just miss it so much because it was so unique. Same with the studio that I had prior to that one. It was very unique. It was this big, large cove wall with tall ceilings and stuff. And yeah, I mean, what's crazy is how different the work looks when the studios change.
Hmm.
And I'd been spoiled for so long. Like it was same thing when I moved into the one that I just moved out of. So when the previous studio closed, because they basically doubled our price per square foot when the lease was up, and we were like, nope, we're out.
Ooh.
But so I moved into the next one, and I had a really hard time figuring out how to make the work that I wanted to make in the new space because the light moves differently studio to studio, right? Like you're just
Mm.
like, oh, but light control, but it behaves differently when you have a different amount of space to work with, especially with
Yeah.
the type of work that I like to do, which is I like to shoot back quite a ways. I like to shoot full length at 135 millimeter if I can. Right now, there
Mm.
isn't a studio that I found that I can do that in. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, this is an
You know,
opportunity to change.
you just need one with the door at the back there, so you can open the door and disappear down into the car park. I've kind of got that with mine. It's not big enough to shoot at that focal length, unfortunately. But I disappear down into the kitchen
Yeah.
through the door.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like nothing against you as the model or anything, but I'm just going to go through to the kitchen so I can use a longer focal length through the doorway.
Yeah, 100%. And that's like all totally a thing. So like one of the studios that I'm in, the longest I can shoot is a 50. And I'm just like,
Right.
"Grr."
Hmm.
I hate
Yeah.
this. But also it's giving me an opportunity for the work to look different. And that's okay,
Hmm.
right? Like it is forcing me to change and forcing me to look at the work differently. And I'm very slow to that. I'm very slow to these types of changes. I'm very glacial
Hmm.
because I'm just like, I have my way of doing things and I don't want to change it. And then it's like,
So
well, you have
how?
to change. I'm like, I don't want to change. And if you have to change, I'm
Yeah.
like, but I don't want to change. And then eventually you're just like, all right, fine, I'll change.
Well, yeah, in those situations like that, you don't have much choice. So how about when you're doing commercial work? Because some clients can be quite picky in what they want to specify. Others can potentially give you quite a lot of freedom and say, do your thing with it. How are your clients generally with that? Are they quite controlling? Have you had a lot of freedom, or have you had to work in quite tight boxes?
I actually haven't taken commercial work yet this year, like at least
Hmm.
on the scale that requires what I had, because
Hmm.
I haven't got a space that I can do that work in right now. So I've just been very honest with the clients of just being like, hey, like I'm looking for space. When I
Mm.
find it, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is like the downside of having like a highly specified, very unique studio like what we had,
Yeah.
is that like, okay, we're kind of scrambling here. Like there's a film studio on the west end of town that's brand new. And so, but the rental fee on that is like several $1,000s a day, which is fine because it's an incredible space and it will do
Yeah.
exactly what I need. But that also means that like when the commercial jobs start coming, it's like, okay, so remember how, studio rental fees used to be $1,000 a day. They're going to be closer to like $5,000 or $8,000 a day now. And so if you're cool with that, then like, let's go ahead. But if you're not, then these are the workarounds and these are the sacrifices that we're going to have to make. So, yeah.
Yeah. So in the past, then, so when you've worked in your studio, they very much wanted the look that you create in there. They're very much commissioning you for that. So what about in terms of stylistic input and that into a commercial project? Have you had much say with your commercial clients? Do they give you much freedom with thinking about the style and the overall look of the image?
It depends client to client. Some of them I get a lot of freedom and some of them I get no freedom whatsoever. And I'm fine with either or. Because sometimes if they have, I mean, it is the nicest thing to work with an excellent art director when they're just like, this is what we want. And you're like, that is a really good idea. I love that. Let's make that happen. And you can kind of just get to be like a cog in a wheel. And that actually can feel really nice sometimes because then you're not just like, it's not all the pressure is on you. But also it can be on the flip side, it can be very frustrating when you have an art director who's maybe new or like your styles are very, very opposite and you're both just trying to like force each other into these boxes and these shapes and everybody's just kind of uncomfortable the whole time. It's kind of like you're rubbing the fur on a cat the wrong way where they're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
You're like, nobody's actually mad, but everyone's just like, why are you doing it that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just kind of like buck up and shut up and just be like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Terrible idea, but let's do it.
So how's your motivation when you go to a shoot like that? And does it vary perhaps with other types of shoots? Because some people can find it very difficult if they don't have creative control. And other people, it's like, well, I've got bills to pay. As long as you pay me some money, don't care. And there can be all sorts of different places in between. What do you think is driving you when you do that kind of work?
I like having a balance of both. Like I said, I'm totally fine if someone's got like a very specific idea of what they want. I kind of like the control freaks sometimes because all I have to do is deliver exactly what they want. And so long as they can communicate to me exactly what they want, which is the key, because some people have exactly what they want, but they don't know how to communicate it. That's less common in the commercial world, but it still happens. That can get frustrating. But so long as you have a control freak who's just like when you've got it, there's no guesswork. You're just like, sweet, awesome, we have to do that, perfect, let's go. This is how we set it up, this is it, and it's just done. But then the creative control stuff also can also be really exciting and really freeing, but I also find that can be sometimes more anxious because they're looking for your interpretation, but they still have an idea of what they want in their head. And so I have to get that out of them so that I can take that information and use that as like my soup base to like add my own stuff in afterwards. And then it's a lot more communication back and forth of like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? Because there's nothing worse than someone just being like, oh, just do whatever you want. And then you do whatever you want. And they're like, well, that's not really what I imagined. And you're just like, cool, right on. That was a waste of day.
Exactly. I tend to say to people who get inquiries through that are emails that basically are just saying, I've got this product that needs photographing. How much is it going to cost? I say, don't answer that with a price.
Never.
Don't do it, because you don't know what that person has got in their head. Get as detailed a brief as you can. Get them to break it down. Because as you say, once you have created an image and you can tick off all those things on the brief, you know in your head that you're going to be fine. If they say, oh, yeah, just take us a photo of it and do your thing, and you do that, and they go, yeah, but not that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. It's so frustrating. So frustrating.
I think it's one of the key parts of the job is actually getting into a deeper conversation before you talk numbers or anything else. Yeah. And for me, if they're not willing to do that, then chances are I'm not going to work with them.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's exactly right. Yeah, definitely getting as detailed a brief as possible. I even tell people, they're like, well, I can't really find anything online. And I'm like, then just go to Midjourney, man. Let's start there. Just be like, okay, you want this like bottle of water or like this like bottle of product or whatever splashing in water with a blue background. Okay, that's
Mm,
pretty generic. There's a lot of ways we can do that. Do you want it vertically? Do you want it horizontally? Do you like
mm,
just like give me something? So I'm always asking for like mood boards, like hook me up with a mood board. And if it's a good commercial company, particularly through an agency or something, they usually
mm,
have all that stuff like locked down. And that usually comes in like within the first two or three conversations back and forth. Once
mhm,
they figure out like, okay, this is someone that we could work with. Okay, fine. But then, you always have to have the conversations of like I even work. So basically how my pricing works is I have a day rate.
mhm.
And that even goes for like boudoir people, like aerialists, like individuals who want to hire me for their own work, for their headshots or whatever. I have a
Sure,
day
yeah.
rate and I just like cut up how much time they want, including editing for day rate.
Mhm,
So if they want to do like a 45-minute headshot session and then, editing is going to take 45 minutes, and I'm like, okay, you're paying for, 2.5 hours because I'm going to include time for the emails going back and forth.
mhm.
And that's fine. And I'm cool with that because that's how long the job takes. And then commercial clients, but then with commercial clients, there also comes usage, right? And so that's another thing
Yeah.
that a lot of people really miss out on. And a lot of companies now are really pushing for. They're like, oh, we want all the rights. I'm like, do you know how much money that's going to cost you, my dear friend, to have all
Yeah,
of
they
the
they
rights?
they
Like,
don't need it either.
no.
Yeah, they often ask for far more than they need in that
Well,
regard. I mean, with
it's usually interns that are asking those questions that they don't know
yes,
any better, so they don't
yes.
understand how this works. And so you're just, yeah, it's
Hmm.
a whole thing.
Yeah, and then you get the interesting ones with product photography sometimes who say, "Oh, what's your day rate?" Oh, great. Okay, you could do our entire product line of 100 things in a day, couldn't you?
Absolutely not.
No. And by the way, a day is not midnight to midnight,
That's
it's
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. A day is 8 hours. And if I really like you, I might push it to 10, but that's it.
so having quite sort of I always send over and I call it an agreement because a contract sounds a bit scary, but
Hmm.
it's a contract,
It's a
and it
contract.
tells
Yeah.
them all this kind of stuff. And I think that's one of those things that when people start out, especially in the sort of commercial side of photography, it's dangerous if you don't really have that, because you're going to get taken for a ride.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that can happen a lot is you will get sent contracts from clients as well. That's
Mm,
just the nature of it. Normally a contract, in my experience, goes both ways. You
yeah.
send them one and they send you one, and we both look through it with a fine-tooth comb and go like, all right, which ways? What I don't
Hmm.
know if you're like this, but one of my favorite things with contracts is reading them, and because it's like a company's bad breakup history,
Yes.
being like, that is an interesting clause. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it's like, why
What
are
was the
you asking for
situation that
that?
made
Yeah,
that
what
necessary?
exactly? What's happened there? Yeah,
Yeah,
something's
yeah,
gone really wrong, hasn't
highly
it?
sus. Yeah,
And
and
then
I
you
will I will
start.
sometimes straight out ask. I will sometimes like if I'm
Yeah.
and I'm just like, what happened that made this very niche thing necessary? And they're like, oh yeah, no, we had this in the past. I'm like, ha, I never would have thought of that. That's crazy. Like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
But also the other thing people have to remember is that contracts are negotiable. So if you see something in the
Mm,
contract that they're sending you, you can negotiate on it.
hmm.
You have to be willing to walk away, but you can
Absolutely.
negotiate on these things. So that's the other thing that a lot of people when they're starting out, they just like get these contracts and they're just like, well, I guess I have to sign it. And sometimes you just have to sign it. Like they're not going to wiggle or anything, but you
No.
always check because every now and then, like what you're doing is niche enough or specific enough that all that other junk that they're asking for isn't always necessary. So
Mm, absolutely. There'll be times when you'll be batting back and forth, arguing about payment terms and things like that. And sometimes big companies have got the process that you've got to get on as a supplier and so on and so forth.
totally. Yeah.
Whereas a small company might be able to pay you next week, but it's finding that common ground if possible with people. And but yeah, you will always find the odd client that just those are the terms, take it or leave it. And you've got to then decide whether you're willing to work in that way, and whether in a few years' time you're willing for them to still be using your work and you're getting nothing for it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we had an opportunity come up and It was a massive, like a huge clothing company, and they wanted 10 images that they could print in their flagship stores that were in Tokyo, in London, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, Amsterdam, somewhere. Anyways, it was like 10 or 12 cities around the world, and they're all, oh, Los Angeles is another one. So these are like big, high traffic
Yeah.
stores, huge
A
traffic stores.
lot of eyeballs on those.
10 images. They wanted to have them up in the stores for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what their budget was?
Hit me with it.
Guess.
Oh,
10
well.
images for a year. Most popular stores in the world.
And this is just to have them up. This is not to have them shot as well, or is this just the licensing
They're
fee you're
licensing
talking?
pre-existing work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
so the work had
see.
already been
Yeah.
shot. They knew which images they wanted.
$1,000 an image?
$3,000, period.
What?
Yeah. For all the stores.
For the whole lot?
For the whole, all 10 images, every single store. Not $3,000 a store, $3,000. And I was like, absolutely not. You're going to spend more in glue than you would spend on the licensing. And I was like, no. I was like, I'll cut you a deal and say $5,000 a store.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, when you think about what it costs to like just put an advert in, not even a national or an international magazine, and it's like a half a page thing or something, what gets charged for that? And then they're trying to get away with that for something on that kind of scale, which is going to get that many eyeballs on it. You think, no.
Yeah. Yeah. And they weren't gonna, and then it was like, well, can we, so the negotiations process starts, right? Where you're just like, that is a number that doesn't exist. Absolutely not. No. And it's like, well, okay, can we put the photographer name on the images on the corner somewhere visible? Then that might count for something, right? Where you're just like, you can die of exposure, but like,
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Then there's a little bit of back and forth here, right? Because there's other companies that will do that. A friend of mine works for a big outdoor company, and it always says in the bottom of every single billboard, the bottom of every single store, everything shot by so and so. And so it's like, okay, maybe that's what we can do here. And like, nope, not doing that. This is the rate. And it was just like, on one hand, you're like, oh yeah, all of my work could be like in all these amazing stores around the world. And also I feel so used.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
used. And you're just like, yeah, I know the $3,000 would be super helpful right now, but like, I feel so used. And somebody's going to take that. Someone is going to take that. And it's so wrong. It's so wrong.
That is the problem with the industry, is that because it's kind of hobbies that evolve into businesses, a lot of the time when people starting out and enjoying it, or perhaps even just because they're desperate, will accept these sort of ridiculous terms. I mean, if you think that was silly, this was an intern and they cocked up big time. They contacted me on behalf of an architect that they wanted to license an image to use because they'd been involved in the design of the place, but for whatever reason they weren't involved in the photo shoot or anything like that. And they wanted to license some images to advertise the fact that they'd been winning awards, and this was one of the projects they'd been involved in. She said, "Oh, I've been doing some research online about how much it costs to license an image.
I'll give
We
you
would like to offer you 50 quid."
No.
After I looked at that and thought, hang on a minute, there must be a zero missing there at least, or something.
Right?
I was like, are you having a laugh? This is ridiculous. Where have you been looking? I said, even if you go on to kind of one of the major sort of stock libraries and you just like a license, an image of a location just to use on your website, it's going to cost you more than that. This is a specific image shot in a particular way to show off the building, and you're saying you're offering me 50 quid.
Wow. Yeah, that's rough.
So they didn't get the nicest of emails back. I mean, I try not to burn bridges, but still it was kind of do you realize how insulting that is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's a similar email that we sent back for this other company. It was just being like, you do realize you are going to spend more in glue than you would on licensing these images that are going to make your store look amazing.
Well, they were going to have one of them printed in and put up in the like where they meet with clients in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking they're going to pay more for the print than they are paying me to license the thing.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then
No.
the negotiation starts of like, okay, yeah, so sorry, maybe there was a typo. You might be missing a zero on that.
Yeah. I had a bit of a groveling phone call afterwards from one of the owners of the architectural firm. It's like, I'm sorry, we shouldn't have let the intern loose on that. They thought they were being clever, doing some research and all that. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think that's exactly what happened in this case. It was the same thing. I had a record label do the same thing. The intern was the one doing the negotiating. And they were like, they just didn't want to even pay for the licensing. They were just like, oh, we really like this image of this artist. We love it up at our headquarters. And I was like, yeah, 100%. Like, a licensing fee for that is going to be about this much. Like, oh, we just thought we could have it for free. And I was like, but you're a business.
Yes.
And like, and I was like, and I love these artists, and I'd be more than happy to supply the images, but you're gonna have to pay to print them. Therefore, you should be paying to license them. And it was just an intern thing. And the intern was like, well, I don't have authority. And I was like, can you get me someone who does? And they just didn't. They just stopped responding to the emails. And I was just like, man, I hate dealing with interns. They're the worst because they just don't know. They don't know that like
magazines can be
a thing.
Yeah, I mean, magazines can be a tricky one because sometimes with some of my work, it might be that the client gets some kind of, and I'm not talking about an advert here, I'm just talking like a bit of editorial or something. The client might get a little bit publicity through it, and they've paid somebody to write some copy for it and so on. And then it gets sent over to the magazine, and the magazine are asking for, oh, could we use that image and that image? And yeah, okay, what's your standard fee that you pay for that? Oh, no, we don't have a budget for that. So, but you sell like magazines with content in it. Where do you think this comes from? And then you're thinking, if I say no, I risk falling out with the client.
Yeah,
because I'm not letting them represent their work with the images. If I say yes, this magazine is just getting a load of stuff for nothing, you can get in a real pickle sometimes with
that's exactly
things.
it. Like, and that's what happened with the record label. So I wound up having like not like a major falling out, but like things changed between me and the people that I'd photographed, because they were just like, oh, but those are our favorite images. And I was like, then just like get your record label to like, and I'm not asking for much here. And like, I'm not asking for thousands by any stretch of the imagination, but like something. And so after that, they started booking like a different photographer for more work, because I knew that she was just giving them the rights to do whatever they wanted with. And I was like, because I like, especially with musicians, I know life is difficult for them. It's also a really hard industry to make a living in. But if you have a record label behind you, they can fork out a little bit of pocket change for licensing. And like, again, I'm not asking for huge money like I am, a company that's printing everything that's going massive in stores around the world, the most popular cities in the world. Like, we're talking just a few $100 here, and and they weren't able to do that. And I was just like, man, I hate this position. I hate being in this position. And I still kick myself because like I really like that relationship that I have with that client, but also same thing with that other client. Like, it hurts. It hurts to know that you've been taken advantage of. And then having those boundaries, sometimes, it can cost you a relationship with a client. And you go like, I don't know which one hurts more, knowing that I got taken advantage of or losing the client,
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a tough spot to be in. And so I really have a lot of empathy for people who have to go through that, because everyone who's working professionally in this field, you're probably having to deal with that, unless you have an agent, in which case your agent's dealing with it. But either way, it's a problem.
Yeah, it's like with I mean, I generally, when I do architecture, it's more things like for hotels or for architects or something like that. When I see people who are doing more on the real estate market like that, I'm thinking, look, unless you're super healthy and in your 20s and full of life and energy, you ain't going to keep that up for very long. So they're paying so little that they're dashing from property to property to property all the way through the day. You think, no way.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I've had some real estate agents reach out to me before, and because they're like, oh, I really love your work. You would do an amazing job with like the houses that I have. And I'm like, yeah, 100%. Like,
Mm.
here's my day rate. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know the person we use is like this much. And I'm like, you should keep using them then because
Yes.
there's no way I'm showing up.
No.
That it's just not even covering the gas in my car. Absolutely not. And they're doing video. And I'm like, keep hiring them then.
Yeah. And drawing a floor plan. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I mean, as far as I know, they're not doing that, but they are doing video work and stuff like that, which is great. But yeah, like that person, that's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
I'm in my 40s now. I'm not going to go running around like that.
Oh yeah, well, so that's the other thing, right? So like I'm 39, I turned 40. I turned 40 in January, and like I'm not I'm not doing that anymore, man. Like if you want to run around and like if you have that in you still, by all means, my friend, you are welcome to it. I am not
Mm,
taking that. I'm not taking that work. Because like I think we've all been there too. But, when you're starting out and you're hungry and you're doing like everything you possibly can for like pocket change,
yeah.
then, yeah. And that is how you learn. And eventually you learn like this is really hard and I am not charging enough.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, how do you get work in these days? Is it mainly through people approaching you? Do you have to go looking for work, pitching for work?
So my situation is a little bit more complicated these days, helping look after somebody in my life who's not well. So I have very,
Yeah.
very, very limited amount of time that I can give to photography. So I have to be very precise about it, and I
Hmm.
can't have a lot of homework with it. So I still will take the occasional client if they reach out to me, but I'm not doing any of the traveling stuff for the last like year and a half.
Mm,
I've just been here. So that changes it a lot is just like, how do I do this? Because I've never really made a huge living in my hometown. I always make my best
mm,
money abroad. But
mm.
I came up with this thing. It was like it started as many things in my life do, especially with photography. It started as a joke on Facebook. And I said, I
Is this
wonder.
the 15 minutes of chaos thing? Is it
That's
that one?
exactly
Yeah,
what it is.
that's
Yeah.
excellent. That.
And
Yeah, I
it
love that.
started I started as a joke and I said, okay, I wonder if anyone would pay me to do whatever I wanted with your face in 15 minutes or less. You show up wearing whatever you want, and I have
Mm,
15 minutes or less to get a good photo of you, just one. And, I'll charge you just for super, like to start out, I was just like, we'll do these super cheap at 150. So they're up to
hmm
175 now
mm.
because it is so much work because it's basically improv portraits. So, because I
Yeah.
don't know what
Uh,
anybody's wearing when they show up in my studio, and I basically just like think of something instantly of just being like, okay, this is how we're gonna light it, and like I
mm.
don't really care if you like it or not. I want you to like it, but I don't know if you're going to like it because this is not a two-way street of conversation. You are showing
You
up,
haven't
and
got.
I'm just like doing rent, like we're throwing glitter on your face, we're like weird lighting, where it's like whatever, and it's 15 minutes. I literally start a timer,
You haven't
and
got time to do much there, have you, at all?
well,
It's
so
quite intense.
what's really interesting is that for most people, I can get a good portrait of them, something that they love, because I shoot tethered. So, and
Uh-huh.
this is where I find it's the most helpful is I shoot tethered and I 5-star the ones where they go, "Oh my God."
Hmm.
So then I know like I'll pull when it comes to editing because I'm also not letting them pick which image I'm editing. They can pick later if they want
Ah,
more,
right.
but I'm picking
Yeah.
the one that they're going to edit because I have no time. Right.
Hmm.
So the limitation is in my case is time. So I need to be able to like shoot all day, edit them all that night. And by the time I wake up the next morning, the job is done. Like everyone's
Yeah.
portraits are done
Yeah.
because I need time to do other things.
Yeah.
So that's been like it's so much fun. And it is a lot of work for admittedly like not a ton of money, really, like especially when you consider like you're making the Facebook group, so you're finding everybody and you're organizing everything and like all the pre-work ahead
Mm.
of time. But I can do all that on my phone from wherever I am doing whatever I'm doing, right? So it's not like I have to be on the computer or I have to be on a location, but it is a wild, wild day.
I can only imagine. Yeah, for me, I'm just thinking changing the lighting setups and moving everything around and so on several times a day like that. You must have somebody assisting you to do that, don't you?
Yeah, oh, yeah, I need an
Y-
assistant. It is
Yeah.
absolutely impossible to do without one.
Yeah, I can imagine I'd be dead on my feet, I think, otherwise if I tried
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, yeah, but it is it is really fun, because then I also, so on the flip side of that is that most of the time for people to hire me to photograph them individually, I cost more than what the average person can afford. So what's been really interesting is I'm getting to meet a whole new demographic of clients that I wouldn't normally get to meet because I'm outside of their price range, because I don't have any shoot booking that you can get for that price, not even close.
And but it's a totally different product though, isn't it? So it's not
100%.
Like you're sort of discounting what you normally do. You've actually set up a totally different product that works for you at that price point.
Exactly. So because I also didn't want to devalue the people who hire me for like the bigger, longer shoots and everything like that, right? So it's like I want to make sure that when people hire me for a day, like when an aerialist comes to me and we spend like 5 hours together in the studio, like working out poses, working out lighting, working out, and like really carving out what they want. It's a very different experience than like what people show up for like the 15-minute portrait thing. And I've had people who've done both, who have hired me for like the longer sessions and then who've also showed up for these ones. And they're just like, oh my God, this is a vastly different experience. And because they also like, they don't really have input as to what it's going to be, right? So like, it's kind of like somebody said, it's like those gumball machine tattoos, where you like, you get the little sticker thing and that's what you're getting tattooed that day. People have been kind of treating it like that. And it's actually been really fun. And also it forces me to think differently about portraiture and portraits of like, what do I think? Because there's all the ways that I normally would shoot portraits. And then it's like, okay, but if I have this free reign to play, what can I do? What am I going to do? Right. So every single time I've done it now, I've done 3. And it's like, I pack different lighting modifiers. I pack different everything just to force myself to do something differently each time.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
it's fun.
Well, we can easily end up getting caught into using our favorite setups and favorite modifiers, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So guilty of that. Yeah. Yeah. That is something that like, I realized that I fell into the world of competent professional when I could show up jet lagged, tired, sick, whatever, and I could still deliver exactly what the client was looking for. And I was like, okay, we have arrived at competency. And now when I'm doing these 15-minute portraits, it's just like everything is an experiment again. And like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but we're gonna try it.
Yeah, it can give you quite a buzz, that sort of improvisation, I would have thought. I sometimes do that for creative products for my own sort of thing. I mean, I'm a very sort of sedate, introverted person, so I tend to be, normally it's me on my own with a product in my little studio, which is not quite the same thing, but I get excited in my own way and move the lights around and have a bit of fun with it. And it's interesting when you put limitations on how that actually can fuel your creativity. I sometimes find that if I give myself access to everything, I can sort of stand there scratching my head thinking, well, I haven't got a brief I'm working to here. What shall I do?
Yeah, the paralysis is real.
It's like too much choice. It's that choice paralysis where as soon as you start chopping the options down and say, okay, I'm only using grids, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
That can be quite good for you, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think limitations are definitely a really great way to basically jumpstart everything for yourself as well. So yeah. I do find though when I do these 15-minute portrait thing and I have it written down in the agreement, I'm like, there's a 50% chance you are going to hate how I photograph your face. Are you okay with that? and it's fun because I would say about 60 to 70% of the people that I photograph, they either share the images or they get more edits. And then there's always the little percentage of people where they're just like, oh yeah, no, that one was good. And I'm just like, oh, did I do it wrong? How can I make it better next time? And I start to internalize it and then I'm just like, nope, don't do that. That's
the
not a game worth
curse.
Doing. Yeah.
You don't want to go down that route. So, I mean, you must have quite a lot of kit that you've developed, brought in over the years to do with when you do things like your more fantasy looks and so on. Do you end up keeping all that stuff? Do you have cupboards and cupboards and cupboards full of lighting modifiers and dresses and so on and so on? And
or do you?
Yeah.
I have a lot. I do rent slash borrow as much as possible as well,
Hmm.
but I do have a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So I
Uh,
mean, I do love to work with designers and I work with as many as I can, but there's also there's so much stuff.
Are you a gear junkie then? Do you keep going out and buying new stuff, or are you able to keep yourself quite disciplined in what you use?
Relatively disciplined because at this point I have pretty much everything that I want. The only thing that I don't have that I do want is the Photex soft lighter, and I've never been able to
Mhm.
find them in stock anywhere. And I would love one of those, the small one and then a medium soft lighter. I think I would have a lot of fun with those. And since I switched from Alien Bees to Ellen Chrome, I don't have a beauty dish anymore, and I miss having a beauty dish because I
Ah.
originally bought one from Ellen Chrome, but
Hmm.
I didn't realize how large it was that I ordered, and it was just way too big, and it was the wrong light
Mm.
quality, so I sold it to a friend of mine, and then I just haven't gone to replace it yet. But also storing beauty dishes is such a pain because they don't
Mm.
fold up or anything. It
Well,
sucks.
you can get those fold-up ones now, can't you? But I mean, like, they
Slightly
can't give
different
you the
light
same
quality.
quality.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
slightly different light quality. It's not the same. I've
yeah.
because I have one that folds up and I love
Uh-huh.
it and it does nice work, but it's not the same. It's not the
No,
same.
I can imagine. Yeah, I've never tried them myself, but yeah,
Mhm.
I can imagine that the shape, the material, the color, it all makes a difference. You know,
Yeah,
whether it's got a white interior or silver interior, and
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It all changes it, and you know the shape of it, and it's just different. It's just different. So
Mm,
the first time I really noticed the difference on that, a friend of mine has a Mola beauty
mm,
dish, and I was at the time I was still shooting Alien Beast, so I had my own, and
hmm.
I had just shot with mine the day before, and then I worked with his the next day, and I was like, oh, there actually is like a pretty decent difference here in light quality. Because I was just like, why would you spend so much on a modifier? What is wrong with you? That's bananas.
Mm.
And then after shooting with it, I was like, all right, like I'm still not gonna buy it, but like that actually is pretty nice light.
There is that danger that you see something and you think, that could fuel my creativity. I could do that with it. I could do this with it. But I think at the same time, once you've been in business a while, you start to realize actually that's not always going to be the best use of your money.
100%. Yeah. Yeah,
So,
exactly.
you know, I mean, for you at this stage where you're at the moment, if you had a sort of a spare chunk of cash to invest in your business, where would you put it?
Ooh,
Would it go into kit or would it go into something else?
that's a super good question. I mean, I guess it depends on how big the chunk of cash was. Because
Oh,
if it
dream
was,
big.
huh?
I say dream big, you know.
I would build my dream studio.
Mm,
And I know
yeah.
exactly what it would look like. I know exactly what it would look like. I have
Yeah.
everything plotted out in my brain, exactly what I want and how I would want it to look. Yeah, I would just, yeah, if money was no object. And it wouldn't even cost that much money to build, really. Like it,
Mm.
you know, just getting like a big square box, basically.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Studios it's just a box, and you could use like an old barn or something like that potentially, depending on the ceiling and everything, obviously. But you
Yeah.
can adapt these old buildings to that. I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things that occasionally my wife and I think about: would that be a good investment for the future, so that when I retire, I can then sell that? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tricky decision because it's a huge investment. So I think unless the money really is spare, you're thinking,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do I
yeah,
want to spend, you know, $500,000 building a space, you know, or buying one and retrofitting it? Because I mean, even the most basic of retrofits, even like
mm,
if you're getting a commercial bay, you know, that you can drive vehicles in and out of, it's still going
yeah,
to cost you about 100 grand to set that up. And that's cheap, you know, to
mm,
like you get the cove built and everything like that, get everything painted, build your makeup
yeah,
room, set up the bathroom. It just adds up really, really, really quickly. Even if you're
hmm,
doing it all by yourself, just the raw materials alone, it is quite expensive. So, you know, like
mm.
you got to figure that stuff out.
Is it something that you would set up to teach from as well? So would you have like lights to record video or something, or are you thinking you'd like to carry on teaching in the studio, or is that something you're not so interested in for the foreseeable future?
I don't know. I mean, I wonder like if there's anything anybody even still wants to learn from me. I haven't put anything out in a really long time. So like, a lot of my process hasn't changed that much, especially when it comes to composites, because
Mhm.
I like the way that I do it and I like the results. And, every now and then I'll find like small things that I can change to make things more efficient or whatever.
Mm.
Like the remove tool in Photoshop is, oh my God, that saves so much time. It's hard to even put into words. But, there's always that conversation of being like, well, if you watch this thing back in 2017, like my process has changed 10%.
Mm.
Do
Yeah.
you want to pay for that again for that extra 10%? I don't know. And then of course, like there's all the shibari work and stuff like that. I've never done any teaching on that. And so I've
Hmm.
debated that. I'm teaching, I mean, I do some lectures every now and then online, things like that. Yeah, basically, if people are interested, then speak the words to me.
Hmm. Oh well, there you go. So petition you for a workshop, and it might just happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you obviously refined your workflow over, well, without meaning to make you feel old now, but about 25 years in the industry.
Yeah, yeah, it's
It's
20
been
20 26 years this year.
oh wow, yeah, it's been a long haul. So what do you think has enabled you to keep going and stay in business? Because there's going to be a lot of people in any business, not just in photography, who are going to think 25 years, nah. They can't keep going that long.
Yeah, I mean, I have that conversation with myself all the time. It's just like, I've been doing the same thing for so long and I've worked in the same industry for so long. Do I still want to keep going in this industry? Is there something
Mm,
else that I want to do? I just haven't found it yet, but I am looking because,
mm,
at some point, like you only get one life. So what else is there to do that could be exciting and interesting and, new and shiny and whatever, right? I don't
mm.
know. I don't think I'll ever quit doing photography. I think that is ridiculous. I mean, I do fantasize about it sometimes of just being like, oh my God, I have so much room in my house. If I didn't do this, there would be so
Yeah,
much like all this stuff that I just wouldn't have to store anymore. And like I would have breathing room, like I have a whole second bedroom in my house here that is just like full of costuming and equipment and gear. And just
yeah.
like to be able to just turn that into like an office would just be delightful, but it's impossible. It's just this room of doom right now, or like this black hole of where stuff goes in and occasionally it comes out again and it goes back in. So yeah, I think about it, but I still
Mm,
haven't found it yet, and I have been looking for probably the last 5 years, kind of like poking around in different industries and thinking about and imagining like what would it be like if and what would it be like if.
mm,
And nothing, because the reality is like knowing my personality, as soon as I found whatever that thing is, I would just start doing the steps towards doing the thing. So it would be like
mhm,
I would start learning about it. I would start doing online courses. I would start trying to meet people who work in those industries and, like trying to
mhm,
start build those next steps. I would just instantly be doing it. So,
mm.
yeah. And yeah, I guess sometimes that makes me feel like a little bit sometimes stuck in the industry because I haven't found anything else yet. But
Do you feel
yeah.
you've been able to evolve over that sort of time? Do you feel that you kind of hit your rut fairly early and have stayed stuck in it? Or because, 25 years of developing, I mean, you started with the modeling side of things
Yeah. Yeah.
first before you got on to doing the
Photography. Yeah.
photography and
Yeah.
so on. So do you feel that you've kind of reinvented yourself or gradually niched down more over those years?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like one of the big things that has been really healthy for me is actually starting to shoot more shibari work
Hmm.
because I'm getting to work with, it's a very, it's a very different type of photo shoot. There's a lot of communication going back and forth. There's a lot of pre-work that goes into it and like prepping and practicing. Cause I mean, obviously for anybody who's photographed shibari, if you've ever like a photo shoot should never be the first time you experience shibari.
Right.
Right, especially for models, right? Because I get so many models messaging me being like, "Oh my God, I'd love to be in your Shibari shoots." I'm like, "Well, have you ever been a Shibari model? Have you ever had anybody do this to you? Oh, no, but it'd be
Mm.
fine. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, no,
Yeah,
not a
I
chance.
imagine that there's a certain amount of strength you've got to have in certain parts of your body just to hold your
Well,
pose.
also you have to know the difference between like good and bad pain and like, you have to know how to hold these things safely and like how to communicate when things are not feeling right or how like you have to there's so many soft skills that go into being a rope model that
Mm,
like unless you've done it, you're not gonna know. And so and like safety on these shoots is like so over the top. Like we have so many safety crew. We have so many safety crew. It's ridiculous. And, and we have like crash mats and like, just all the things, safety scissors, people there to make sure like, we've got somebody trained in first aid, like all the things,
mm,
to make sure that these things go smoothly. And then we also make sure everyone is a professional and everyone is
mm.
experienced and everyone has worked together before prior to the photo shoot.
Yeah.
Because like things can go wrong really quickly with Shibari. Unfortunately, on our shoots, it hasn't happened yet, but it can still happen. And so we're always ready for it because you can have somebody who's super, super experienced. And for whatever reason that day, like they just can't lift their foot off the ground. And you're just
Mm.
like, cool, not a problem. Absolutely not a problem. Then like, we're just going to get you down and we're going to let you like breathe through this. And just, if this is not your day, then today is not your day and that's fine. And we can all go
Mm.
home because I always make sure that like I mean even from the rigging standpoint like their hands get exhausted like they're so tired and raw because these knots
Mm.
have to be so tight but there's something that's like it's really refreshing for me because it's also not I'm not spending hours and hours and hours in digital art on the back end once we're done the shoot it's like I'm I'm shooting it and then I'm cleaning up the image doing like basic cleanup and stuff and then it's done and that
Mm.
feels really nice to not come home and then sit in front of the computer for another like 10, 15, 20 hours building these composites, just like by
Yeah.
myself in the dark. You know,
Oh, don't the cats come and join you sometimes?
they do sometimes, yeah, and they step on the
Yeah.
keyboard and then Photoshop does weird things. And I'm like, oh God, what just happened?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not so great.
Yeah, that happens. I've more than once put a question into the Photoshop forums being like, this is the screenshot of what happened. How do I unfix, like, how do I fix this? And they're like, well, how did this happen? I'm like, my cat stepped on the keyboard or my Wacom tablet. That's another one.
Oh, you've got a touch sensitive one then, have you, with that?
But so there's also the
Yeah.
buttons on the side and
Oh, yes, yeah.
her little
Yeah.
toes will like push buttons. And I'm just like,
Oh,
oh no, what's happening? Because
no.
she'll sit here. It's super cute. She'll sit here and watch the screen and like watch the mouse go back and forth and back and forth. And it's so cute. But then, yeah, then my Wacom starts going crazy and then like everything starts like skitzing out. And I'm like, oh man.
Yeah. Excellent. It's been really good talking to you. Really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit through this. And I would like people to know where they can look at more of your work, where they can keep up with what's going on, where they can show an interest in the book if they would like to. So where would you send people to?
So you can go to my website, reneerobyn.com, and on there, there's also a mailing list to sign up for where I will be sharing book updates and, tour updates and everything else. I haven't actually sent out a mailing thing yet, but I'm working on it. I'm late. That's one thing that I made a mistake on. Everyone told me like years ago, like 10, 15 years ago, they're like, make sure you make a mailing list. And because everyone told me to make a mailing list, I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah,
Like,
I know that kind of feeling. It's like when people talk about getting your systems in place and everything's got to be all processy and so on. I know the logic of it, but my brain just goes, no,
yeah. Yeah.
no.
Which is the wrong answer because that's the best thing to do.
Yeah,
So
it shoot yourself in the foot with that, really.
I fully shot myself in the face. There's no question about it. Yeah. I absolutely screwed up my career by not starting a mailing list sooner. So I do finally have a mailing list up, so you can sign up there and that'll be the best way. I also have Patreon, which is where I share like a lot of behind the scenes and like sneak peeks of work coming up. That's the one place where you can see like actual sneak peeks of the book, where because I haven't put them anywhere
Okay.
else on social media. I have Instagram, which is Renee Robyn Photography. I'm on TikTok, YouTube, some version of Renee Robyn, Renee Robyn Photo, Renee Robyn Photography. If you search I'll show up somewhere.
I imagine so. You'd spread them out quite a lot there. What about for your tutorials now? People who perhaps don't already know you for your compositing tutorials, where would you send them to take a look at those?
The most recent ones are up on Creative Live. So those are probably some of the best places to go. And I am low-key working on another compositing tutorial. It's just time is the limiting factor these days. So we're working on the layouts and everything else. And I'm trying to figure out, like, do I include the shooting part? Do I, like, what am I doing here? Or do I want to just make it like purely a retouching tutorial? I mean, that would be the easiest one to film, but I also like to include the lighting as well. So we'll see. I've debated putting out like these micro tutorials of, something that's like 45 minutes or less, and making them like cheap, like $25 or something, of just being like, hey, if you want to learn how to blank, then this is where you can get that. So I'm debating that. And I also photographed a whole bunch of really beautiful, I haven't even got it off the camera yet. The camera's sitting right there judging me. I shot some beautiful stock because we had just like the most incredible snow days here this winter. So I have this like really great bokeh snowfall stock that I can't wait to like put that online and then also work with it, because I just did a portrait of a woman with like fairy wings and a corset and stuff like that on my Instagram. Her name is Ruby Rocks. And I was thinking about it going, oh man, it'd be so nice to use that stuff for like glitter, to have like this shimmery, sparkly stuff around her. And then I was like, oh, but that means I have to get it off the camera. I was like, 10 o'clock. So I just put it out without it. So I'm looking forward to getting that out as well.
I think we all end up with some of those images that get stuck on the memory card somewhere or on a drive somewhere, and we think, oh yeah, I meant to do something with that. And occasionally I go through some old stuff and do a clear out, and then suddenly go, oh, why did I never edit that?
Yeah. I call it dumpster diving for my hard drives. Hard drive dumpster diving, of just like digging back into old stuff, being like, oh yeah, that was really good. I should probably, we're gonna do that right now. Yeah.
Well, thanks again for agreeing to come onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been fun having you on, and thank you everybody. If you're still listening and we hadn't put you off with all that linguistics and language stuff at the beginning, thank you all for listening to the Focus Professional podcast. Get connected, trained, supported, and qualified with the Society of Photographers, sponsors of the Focus Professional podcast.